This week, I wanted to talk about some of the downsides that I've noticed and seen about being someone who's really self-aware, someone who analyzes shit quite a lot, just a bit of an overthinker. I wanted to talk about some of the ways that I think this can actually be kind of negative, which I feel like, being self-aware is like a good trait to have. Obviously, if you lack self-awareness, you probably suck. Do you know what I mean? If I'm being honest, you probably suck. But there's a level of it that's healthy and benefits you and the people that you're spending your time with. And I think there's a line that is quite often crossed where it's kind of like you're being hyper self-aware, you're thinking about everything a bit too much, you're analyzing shit that doesn't need to be analyzed, to the point where I think there's definitely some cons. So I kind of wanted to talk about that. And I wanted to talk about some of the positives as well to being a little bit more laid back, like still being self-aware, you know, but taking everything a little bit lighter. I think I've always been someone who, I'm fairly introspective. I do think about things. I've never really been someone who is like ridiculously laid back. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know some people that they're just not wired like that. They're just wired to take everything um as it is, and like they don't really get too worked up about things. I've never really been overly that way ever, but I've definitely, I think I'm working on creating a balance where I think I am naturally someone who's a little bit more of a thinker. I am quite an anxious person. I'm not someone who is just super fucking chill about everything, but I think it's important to actually manage that, to get to a place where you can take everything a little bit more lightly sometimes. Depends on what the thing is, but having a little bit more control over where you let your mind analyze and overthink, and where, you can kind of just shut it down and, tell yourself like, this situation doesn't warrant overthinking. Like, it's not that fucking deep. Do you know what I mean? And I think the world we live in now is very it likes to therapize everything and like intellectualize everything, and put labels on everything and use all these buzzwords, and everything is very like, you have to be very careful um with everything. Do you know what I mean? Like, even when I just said sometimes you have to tell yourself that it's not that deep, I was like, shit, am I gonna like, is that controversial because it could be seen as invalidating? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean, is like, the world we live in is very, it breeds the having to be in your head all the time, having to overthink everything, because it feels kind of like you're walking on eggshells a lot, I think, in this current, state of, the world and social media, and everything sometimes feels a little bit sensitive to the point where you have to think about every fucking thing before you say it. And I don't think that helps, especially if you're someone who's putting your 2 cents out there. Like, I'm saying this and I'm posting it online. I'm not just saying this to a friend like in the kitchen over a glass of wine. I'm putting this online, so it's like I'm obviously being conscious of um what I'm saying and things, but I do feel like it can take over to the point where you don't feel like you can actually just like say your honest thoughts. I think the reason behind a lot of that is self-improvement. The self-improvement world is hugely popular. Wellness, self-improvement books, podcasts, everything. It's everywhere. And that is amazing. It's great that I feel like people are a lot more aware of the fact that they have shit to work on, and like everyone's a little bit more like switched on. And in ways that's great. I think as someone who has been very into self-improvement and like read a fuck ton of books about it, and I'm very involved in that world. Obviously this podcast is in the self-improvement genre. um I've definitely noticed that there's pros, 100%. I do not think I would be the person that I am today by any means if I hadn't gotten into this genre, and really like been interested in it and taken it kind of on board, if you know what I mean. But there's definitely cons, and I think it can turn you into someone who is so critical of everything and sees everything as like a project. Like, it can make you see yourself as a project, as something that needs to be improved all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone has areas of improvement, everyone has weak spots, everyone could do with a dose of um self-improvement. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's great to do that. But again, there's a line where it's like, you can start to just see yourself as something that always needs to improve and be fixed. And this, I did this wrong, and oh my God, this isn't good about me, and I need to work on that, and I need to remember to, like, I need to get better at that, and this is a flaw of mine, and blah, blah, blah. And it can make you just not enjoy your life whatsoever. Do you know what I mean? And I think that can ruin your relationship with yourself as well, because you're not treating yourself well if you're being critical of yourself all the fucking time and you're being really negative. And I think that that can cross the line where you're no longer treating yourself well. You're no longer, appreciating yourself, seeing yourself as human, actually just being present in your life. I think personally, I've noticed that being too self-aware and getting too into self-improvement and everything, you learn all this information, you learn all about these different things and these different, like, ways to communicate and these different ways to be in a relationship and these ways to function better in a family or to improve friendships and improve your inner child healing. And, there's all these fucking areas where you can, like, work on. And it can be quite overwhelming to the point where, like, you're just analyzing things all the time rather than actually experiencing anything. You were just analyzing it and picking it apart in your brain. And part of that is because the more you learn, the more you know. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously, the more information you have, the more you have the ability to then analyze things, because you can actually sit and think about it and be like, oh, like, that relates to this thing that I read or this thing that I heard. But it's like, there's a point where I'm like, I feel like I'm not even, like, living anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not this bad anymore. I've definitely been in a place where I'm seeing everything like that. And then also it makes you kind of judgmental towards other people too, because I think you learn about different ways to be and the best ways to approach things and things. And then you look at, like, your friends or family who maybe aren't in that place or don't know that or aren't interested in self-improvement as much, and you start kind of being critical, even if it's just in your head. You're thinking, like, oh, well, that wasn't a good way, she shouldn't have communicated it like that, or she shouldn't have used that word, and that was invalidating, and this and that. And then you can just, like, lose your fucking mind and be really annoying. I've also, in my experience, felt that it's made me kind of annoying when, like, I feel like it can make you kind of cocky, where you feel like you know everything about not everything, but, like, you become someone who thinks they're, like, really well-rounded and knows, like, a fuck ton about how to be and how to live. And you think you have, like, this like, leverage to be like, actually you shouldn't have done that, or actually you shouldn't have said that, or actually there's a study that says this, and it's just like, shut the fuck up. Do you know what I mean? It's just like one of the most annoying personality traits in the world is someone acting like that. And I think it can make you like that if you get too deep into self-improvement. And this is what I mean, that, like, it can be sort of counteractive, because obviously self-improvement, you're improving your quality of life and your happiness and your health and how you are. You're improving it, you're making it better. Self-awareness, these things are positive by nature, but too far, and it's not self-improvement. You're actually probably making yourself feel worse and making yourself worse of a person sometimes. Do you know what I mean? I think it's like you have to really know. This is so, like, oh my God, like, I was about to say you have to be self-aware about the fact that, like, how self-aware you should be. Like, this is just, like, fucking with my own head. This is a perfect example of sometimes it's too much, because what the fuck? Like, anyway, like, you have to learn your limits of, like, there's self-awareness and self-improvement, and there's a line where I'm helping myself and I can feel that it's actually beneficial. And I know that if I take it this far, or if I let it become too much of a focus, I need to draw back because it's no longer helping. Do you know what I mean? You kind of need self-awareness about how self-aware you're being. And this is where it's tricky, because I think once you start going down this kind of spiral and becoming someone that, like, overthinks shit all the time, it can never end. And then it's like, that's not a life that's enjoyable or a life that's, like, super healthy, in my opinion. Because I don't think you can both be present in your life and be experiencing things and actually be in the moment whilst also being in your head. I don't think it's possible. I think you're generally in one or the other. And because, to be present is to actually be in your body and be in a moment and, like, in a conversation and not analyzing shit in your head. They don't go together at all. So I think if you become someone who's too self-aware and like, too much of a thinker, you're no longer really living your life. Do you know what I mean? It's like you physically are still having conversations with people and going to work and like doing shit. But like your head is elsewhere all the time. You know what I mean? And that's just like, it's a tiresome state of mind to have. I think it can be really fucking negative, if I'm being honest. I think being self-aware is great, but being too self-aware, I think, can make you fucking miserable and not enjoy anything. So, you know, it opens up the conversation to, is ignorance bliss? You know, and when it comes to self-awareness, if you're ignorant about that, no, I don't think it's bliss. I think you would be staying stuck in cycles and not growing and being annoying and repeating things and being like a bad friend, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you have no self-awareness, nothing's gonna go well. So ignorance in that area, not bliss, in my opinion. But I think if we're talking about being an overthinker, I could see how ignorance may be bliss. Like, if you're someone who's not wired to pick things apart. Thing is, though, I'm saying wired. I do think there's like a fuck ton of like control that we have. I don't think it's you're wired a certain way and you can't change it. I think that, like I said, I've been someone who has definitely gone down the spiral of being so overthinky and so analytical and so like critical of everything, and I've like acknowledged that and drawn back, and I wouldn't say I'm in that state anymore. So I do think you have control. Like, it's not like wired, like you're hardwired and you're like fucked if that's like how you are. But I do think people, like, I guess, naturally sway a little bit more like chilled and laid back, or a little bit more type A. Do you know what I mean? And I'm definitely a little bit more type A by default. However, like I said, there is definitely control, and like, as much as you can't really control every thought that you have ever, like, thoughts are going to pass through your mind all the fucking time, like non-stop. I think you have control over what you choose to give the time of day, and what, you know, what thoughts and thought patterns that you repeat and like indulge in. Do you know what I mean? I think you can have thoughts that are useless and not beneficial at all, and you can acknowledge it and drop it. And, you know, sometimes we're not going to do that because we're human, but I think you don't have to pick it up and analyze it with every thought. Do you know what I mean? That's where I think the control lies, is you can kind of choose how you want to approach things. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, my point was, if you're someone who is naturally more laid back and kind of takes things at face value and doesn't really try and read between the lines, I think there's definitely benefits to that, because I do think, you know, life is short, and I think I always go to this morbid place, but like, we know that we're gonna die. Like, that's the only thing that's like guaranteed in life, is that like life is short and we're gonna die, and like we don't know when. Sorry to go there for like the 100th time on this podcast, but I really think it, like, for me, puts things in perspective where I'm like, nothing's that deep. That's kind of one of the things I use to not be so like analytical of everything. I'm like, is it that fucking deep? No. But yeah, I think because of that fact, like, being someone who just is a little bit more laid back, I think you could probably enjoy things more and not have such a tiresome state of mind. You know, your day-to-day life may be a little bit more enjoyable. However, I think you can then miss out on a lot of things, you know. For example, like, if you're someone who, you know, like I said, I'm fairly type A. I'm the type of person, if I'm like going on a trip, I will do a fuck ton of research before I go, because I really want to like experience it and like appreciate it when I'm there. I don't want to go in blind, so I will like research the history and the restaurants and the best things to see and how long they've been there and who built them and why and blah blah blah. So then I go and be like, oh my god, this is sick, like, it's been here so long, and like I could actually take it in, because I'm someone who, like, I just like to research and think, and like, I'm just type A as fuck. And like, you know, if I went on a trip with someone who's really fucking laid back and didn't bother doing any research, they would go there and just be like, oh, cool, a rock. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I'd be like, I would be able to appreciate that thing more because I have spent some time putting some thought into it. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like that might seem like, how is that linked? But my point is, like, being ignorant sometimes, I think, can cause you to actually miss out on like a lot of the great things in life, because you're not bothering to think about them. You're just like too laid back. Do you know what I mean? Where you're just like, oh, fuck it, who cares? And then it's like there's so many experiences and you know, emotions and memories, and people are so interesting, and like, being really interested in people and being like, it's not necessarily analytical, but being like curious as a person. I think that's kind of what I'm talking about. Being someone who's very curious about things, I think you get a lot more out of life. And I think if you're someone who's very laid back to the point where you're not really interested in things, I think you miss out on a fuck ton. I know this is kind of like a different conversation, but I feel like they all tie together, being self-aware, I feel like comes generally with having a curiosity about yourself and about life and about other people. And generally, I think people that aren't very self-aware aren't very curious. They don't really ask questions and they don't really analyze or think about anything. And that's what I mean by there's a line. I think analyzing things and being curious has a lot of benefits. I think you can really someone might see something, like I said, someone's just looking at a rock. You're looking at something really fucking cool that you're going to remember forever and really cherish. Do you know what I mean? So it's it's definitely benefits to both. It's is ignorance bliss, or are you missing out on half of life? I don't know. It depends. It's an interesting one. But back to some of the cons to being someone who's hyper self-aware and too much of a thinker, right? Here's some of the cons that either I've noticed from my experience or I've just seen or I could predict. Do you know what I mean? A whole mix. One of them is you can sabotage a good thing. This is one that I think a lot of people have probably experienced. I definitely have. Where something's actually a positive thing, it's actually good. Everything's flawed, nothing's perfect, but it's generally good and nice. And if you think too much, you can ruin it. Because not only will you ruin it in your own head, but then you could start, for example, say it's a relationship. If you're someone who's always viewing it through this lens of it's a project, which you probably are if you're really, really self-aware and um, you could criticize and pick it apart to the point where they don't want to be with you anymore. And maybe they were actually a really good partner and you just fucked it because you were thinking too much and being too critical and picking up on every little thing and, expecting perfection to the point where they don't want to be with you. Same as friends. It can cause you to have these standards and expectations, I think, for people when you're someone who just thinks too much. It can cause you to I don't know, have these standards that no one can reach, I feel like. And again, it can be annoying, but it can also just hit a point where you're making the other person feel kind of like shit. Again, it could be a really good thing that you have, whether it's a relationship or friendship or again a job. It could be anything. And if you view it through that lens and you're kind of someone who thinks that way, you can quite easily just sabotage it and ruin it. I think it can cause you to focus on the negative to the point where you're never going to be satisfied with anything that you have. And you can just ruin things and push things away because you're being so critical. I think that's definitely a big con to being someone that's like I said, it's self-aware, but it's also that bleeds into other things. It's not just you being really aware and viewing yourself in this certain way. It bleeds into how you see everything. I feel you just become really fucking analytical of everything. And I think that can be so negative. I think it's great to think about things and it's great to have standards, of course, but thinking, I think, can ruin so much. Overthinking things is actually, I think, quite poisonous to relationships and stuff, And like I said, I think it can give you a tiresome state of mind. You live in your mind. You have to live there all the time. I think it can make that not a very fun place to live. It can just, at the end of the day, give you less fun. You just have a general worse quality of life because you're not having fun, you're not being present, you're not enjoying things. In order to do that, you have to accept that not everything is perfect. Things are flawed, but things are fun and things are nice too. And I think if you're someone who's too much in your head, it's that will just bug you rather than the other person that sat next to you that's maybe is a little bit more chilled, having the same experience, just fucking enjoying it, just in the moment accepting it. Maybe it's not exactly what they wanted either, but they're having a great evening, whereas you're sat next to them thinking, oh, this and all that and blah, blah, blah. It's just it can make you unhappy. And I think it can just ruin experiences and your general day-to-day and anything anything good. You can just miss it. It can just pass you by because you're not in state of mind to just let things be what they are and enjoy them. And I think that's so important. That's something I've really like learned in the last few years, is like, you need to just enjoy shit. Because like I said, I was definitely in a place where I was like thinking about everything all the time, and like I wasn't having any fun. And now I've got like a lot better of a balance than I ever have. I'm still obviously gonna like keep my eye on it, but like, again, I'm not gonna like make it my whole fucking personality trait to improve myself and to make this balance perfect, to make this perfect, and I can't do this too much. And like, that's just not fucking fun. I'm not gonna do that to myself. That's never even gonna happen, because if it's not one thing, it's another. Do you know what I mean? That would never end. And like, I don't know. I just think sometimes I think a lot of the point of life is to enjoy it and have good relationships and good experiences and a good relationship with yourself and have fun and enjoy it. And I think you can't do that. You legitimately cannot do that if you're just seeing everything through this lens of, I don't know, just picking it all apart. I think you have to come out of your head and just enjoy shit sometimes and just be in it and have fun and laugh and smile with your friends and stop fucking thinking about everything. You know, I'm talking to myself here. If you relate, then that's great. But I think that's something that I've learned, like I said, in the last few years, is like, life is too short. You have to actually just have some fun and enjoy it. And you can think all you want and pick things apart all you want, but like, or you could just like relinquish that control, let go, and actually like have a nice time. Do you know what I mean? God forbid. I think another thing that's also very common in the overthinking realm is, I think, trying to read between the lines all the time, trying to find the deeper meaning in what people are saying when they're talking to you, trying to work out what people are thinking and what they're feeling, and if they're actually mad at you, or if they're saying one thing and they're meaning another. And like I said, not taking things at face value. Like, I think there is such bliss in just, you know, if someone texts you okay, instead of thinking like, oh my God, was that an angry okay? Or like, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? And we're all prone to doing that. We're all prone to doing that. But actively kind of self-soothing by talking to yourself about it and being like, actually, it's like, it's not my job to work out if someone's annoyed at you, or if someone's mad at you, or you've upset someone. I think in most cases it's their responsibility to tell you that and to bring that to you. You can't read minds. Don't expect yourself to take things a little bit at face value. Obviously, there is a lot of like social cues and things that we can pick up on. Do you know what I mean? If you're texting someone and you're sending kisses and shit, and then they're randomly really blunt, of course it's a different vibe. You're gonna be like, whoa, what the fuck? You're not gonna be like, oh well. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're all gonna notice that kind of shit. It's the same as like when you're talking to someone and their mannerisms. You can tell when something's up. And now, like, we all use social media so much, you can kind of now read people's moods sometimes through how they type and shit. And this is what I mean by, like, the world we live in so many ways is just making us all prone to being too much in our heads, because it's just like everywhere. But you know, I think sometimes maybe that's a bad example, the like a blunt okay, because sometimes that is just like really blatantly obvious. Like, there's a mood shift here. Of course you're gonna notice that, and like, it's not, you shouldn't be hard on yourself for being like, oh my God, what's wrong, when it's like, there's obviously something wrong, like you're just picking up on something normal. But yeah, I do think there's a lot of times where like it's good to take things at face value. It's good to actually if someone's saying something, just take it as that. If someone's you know, if someone's saying they're fine and they're acting a bit weird, if you've asked and like, do you know what I mean, they're not going to tell you, it's not your job to then like go insane trying to work out what's going on. And you know, there's a lot of times where it's better to just take what people are saying and like believe that, rather than try and like decipher everything and read between the lines. I think it's just exhausting, you know, trying to be like a detective all the time and try and work out what's going on all the time. And it's just like, there's too much like going on. We're already stressed enough, we're busy enough, we've got our own things. Like, you're trying to be a good person, you're trying to communicate your side. Like, you also don't need to then fucking work out what someone's not saying, you know, behind like their message and what they actually mean. Like, that's just not, it's not your job. And I don't know, I think that's just an area of overthinking that can just make your life a living hell. Is just being like, oh my God, what did they actually mean? What, you know, it's just like, oh my God, that will keep you up at night. And like, again, we're all gonna do that because it's human, and like we all have like a sensitivity to that kind of thing. But again, there's a line. And I think going back to the being someone who analyzes too much and thinks too much, and how you can end up having this like perfectionist standard for like people in your life as well as yourself. You definitely can be that way with yourself, but I think it can bleed into relationships and friendships and things. I think a negative I've noticed as well, mind my missing nail, I'm getting them done tomorrow, is I've noticed this, I've experienced this, is where it can cause you to isolate yourself a bit and be too protective with your peace. Do you know what I mean? Like the whole like protect your peace. I'm very with that. I think you should protect your peace. I think if something is like, if you can't do anything about a situation you've tried and someone's just bringing you down or a situation's making you feel like shit, protect your peace. Do you know what I mean? Your peace is like your sanity, your enjoyment of life, how healthy you are. Like peace is everything. And I'm very, if you can do anything to protect that, I think you should. But being that way and having these kind of standards, I think there's kind of perfectionistness to yourself. I think it can make you overprotect your peace, like I said, to the point where like you think everything is like a threat to your peace. Do you know what I mean? This might not like be something that like makes sense or like, I don't know, but I think for me, I've definitely gotten to a place before where like I think too much. I'll be more prone to like cutting people out or being like, I don't know, like, again, you learn, you read books about it, you listen to podcasts about it and what you deserve in a friendship and all these effort, and it can make your standards really high in a way that's great because that's self-care. Do you know what I mean? To have standards, but it can sometimes go too far where you're like, this person's not good for me, this person it doesn't do this enough, and this person is toxic because they do this, and this person, do you know what I mean? Like that's toxic. Do you know what I mean? I think, again, it's like the current state of the world. Everything's therapized. There's words for everything. This person's a narcissist. This person's toxic to me. This person's like traumatizing me. And like, obviously, these things can also be true. People can traumatize you. People can be narcissists. But I think we chuck these words around all the time. Again, it's kind of a different conversation. We chuck these words around. We use them as a way to cut people out and isolate ourselves sometimes. I think that can exist if you're someone who is too in your head. You can then think about things so much or think about your relationships with people so much, pick them apart, think of all the bad shit because you have that negative lens that you can't overthink and also be a really happy, positive person and be like a massive overthinker. I think they cancel each other out. I think you're going to be miserable. That's why I think it's so important to find a balance, because I think happiness and being present and enjoying your life doesn't go hand in hand with picking everything apart and fucking analyzing everything. That it's interesting for a minute and you have to then shut it the fuck off because you can't enjoy your life that way. But yeah, like I said, I think it can make you kind of isolate yourself because you think too much. You live in your head. That alone can isolate you massively and make you kind of lonely. But it also, I don't know, I think it can just make you overprotect your peace, to the point where you can actually like lose friends and relationships, and then you're just like actually are alone. Do you know what I mean? I think it can get to that place. I don't know. I think it's important to appreciate yourself and see the positive in yourself and who you are, and not, again, see yourself as something that needs to be fixed and worked on all the time. There's so many good things, and it's like, why not focus on those sometimes? Why not? Appreciate yourself, be nice to yourself, being nice and appreciating your relationships. Maybe it's your boyfriend or your best friend or your mum or your dad or your brother. Focusing on the parts that you love about them, you're gonna enjoy everything more. You're gonna enjoy the relationship more, get more out of it. You're gonna have more fun. You're gonna be more excited about life. Everything's better when you have a more positive lens, obviously. And I think it's important to be kind and gentle and patient with yourself and not expect yourself to, you're a human being. You're not some thing to be like molded with self-improvement consistently forever until you're like gonna be you're never gonna be happy with yourself. Do you know what I mean? I think it's such a fine line to be someone who's really into self-improvement and someone who also really loves themselves. I think it really can take over to the point where do you actually love yourself anymore, or do you just see yourself as a project? Do you know what I mean? It's so easy to slip over into the other side of it where you're not being nice to yourself, and I think that's so fucking important. Anyway, yeah, in conclusion, I think there's pros and cons to everything in life. But there's pros and cons to being someone who's self-aware. I kind of diverted from being self-aware, but being someone who, lives in their head a bit, thinks about things too much, analyzes things too much, blah, blah, blah. These are all like self-aware adjacent things. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Do you think it's healthy? Where do you think the line is? Do you think that you've had any experiences where it's made you more unhappy to try and improve things all the time? Because I definitely think it can, 100%. And yeah, just let me know your thoughts. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I will talk to you next week.